Our guest today, Sarah Fortt with Vinson Elkins in Austin, Texas, is a force to be reckoned with when it comes to E&S issues, particularly corporate culture. I'm Brock Romanek. Today on Zippy Point. So Sarah, pay equity, a very hot topic, growing hotter by the day. Which members of management typically are involved in improving their company's pay efforts?
No, great question, Brock. So I think generally speaking, it used to be the focus primarily of the HR department, right? And limited to the HR department. And that's even to the extent that companies paid attention to pay equity at all, because I think there are a lot of companies for whom this is a pretty new topic to pay close attention to. I think increasingly you're seeing companies involve a role like the chief diversity officer. I think you're also seeing other members of management pay attention and maybe as part of the succession planning process. So I think it's becoming more intentional. Still a lot of variance across companies, just because it's still, like you said, for some companies, an emerging topic.
And then the board's involvement. Which board committee typically has oversight?
I would expect the compensation committee to be involved, consistent with their role in overseeing the compensation philosophy of the company. But you might also see the full board get involved to some extent, again, potentially in connection with like succession planning and that sort of thing.
And then what are you seeing in terms of board discussions, board presentations? What are those typically like?
On pay equity, so I'd expect that a company that's doing this well would have a fair amount of data in it, even if that was in an appendix with conclusions for the board in a shorter upfront document. I'd expect it to be pretty data driven. For companies that are just dabbling into this space or just kind of approaching this space for the first time, approaching it for the first time intentionally, I should say, I would expect there to be a lot of background information. So what's happening in the space? Why is this a topic? If it's the first board presentation, they may not even completely understand everything that's happened in the space and why it's such a hot topic now. So I'd expect there to be some background. They may bring in someone like their compensation consultant to help with both the data and the background.
And then if a board or a comp committee decides that an action plan is necessary to improve company's strategy regarding pay equity, what might that look like?
So I think this still looks very different company to company. Companies are feeling their way along this, I would say. The truth is, when it comes to pay equity, it's a complicated topic. It's complicated for a number of reasons. Primarily, it's, historically, first of all, companies looked at pay equity in terms of similar positions or the same position, same qualifications, same pay. Increasingly, there's pressure on companies to look more broadly across the organization in terms of value that people are delivering to the organization. And then just generally speaking, do you have people, certain types of people in certain types of positions that result in them having lower pay, and what does that mean? So I think it's part of a broader conversation around diversity issues within the organization. So I think for companies that are looking to do this more effectively, I think it basically boils down to two responses. One, compliance. You obviously want to comply with the law and make sure that you're reducing risk in the area. And then data. You want to get your facts straight. You really want to dive in and be willing to be brave, quite frankly, in looking at the data. It may not be pretty when you first approach it, particularly for companies that are addressing these sort of issues for the first time, or are in industries that are particularly challenged.
Yeah, we're finding, I think, investors demanding more transparency in this area, employees, and then, of course, prospective employees. So for a company and a board to get its house in order, it seems important to get ahead of the curve. And depending on what state you're in, some of this is being regulated now. So it's better to get everything together now before there's even greater pressure on companies.
I think that's right. And before you get investor engagement asking you to disclose information like this, which is its own separate consideration with its own separate challenges and considerations that companies need to kind of walk through. But before you get that, I think it is important to really know what your internal story looks like. What is the data and what does the data say? So not just raw facts, but what does that mean over time? What are your trend lines look like over time?
Great. Thank you very much.